You're listening to the Monocle Daily, first broadcast on the 10th of May 2024 on Monocle Radio.
The UN General Assembly backs Palestine's bid for full membership. Opinions on the matter seem divided at Eurovision. And how hard can it be to write a tourism slogan? I'm Andrew Muller. The Monocle Daily starts now. Hello and welcome to the Monocle Daily, coming to you from our studios here at Midori House in London. I'm Andrew Muller. It's Friday, so it's mostly our weekly in-house daily, and the Monocle staffers who believed that cocktails would be served were James Chambers, Tom Webb, Josh Fennett and Natalie Theodosi. They will discuss the art of the tourist slogan and Monocle's new tie-up with Gucci, plus we'll hear from our Eurovision desk chief as controversy roils Malmo. Stay tuned, all that and more coming up right here on the Monocle Daily. This is the Monocle Daily. I'm Andrew Muller. The UN General Assembly has voted aye on a resolution which may yet compel the UN Security Council to reconsider Palestine's pitch to become the body's 194th full member. While most UN members have already recognised Palestine, full membership tends to be thwarted and was as recently as last month by the veto of the United States in the Security Council. The latest move comes as reports suggest that a batch of EU countries which haven't already recognised Palestine, including Spain, Ireland, Malta and Slovenia, are poised to do so. Well, I'm joined with more on this by Daniela Peled, Managing Editor at the Institute for War and Peace Reporting. Daniela, will this vote make a particularly, significant difference to anything?
Well, I think it is pretty significant in the pursuit of what the Israelis call lawfare. The Palestinians have been pursuing this for quite a number of years now to gain recognition at the UN, membership of bodies like UNESCO, for instance, and the trappings and trammels of a state and of statehood, even while they aren't full member, they can't vote at the UN. I mean, this is not going to make any difference in that, but in terms of diplomatic efforts, it's quite significant, and it shows support for Palestinian independence and sovereignty. I mean, the whole issue of the two-state solution, which is referenced in the resolution, was more or less off the table until 6-7 months ago, and now it's being seen as the only way to move forward following the Gaza conflict.
The two-state solution is something that the United States, notionally at least, is still behind. That being the case, what is the United States' current objection to recognising Palestine and accepting it into the UN?
Well, I mean, the implications would be huge, and it's seen as handing over a kind of prize, if you will, without full payment or acknowledgement. Israel's case is that this would be rewarding terror. The recent war was started on the 7th of October, and then 7 months later, Palestine is recognised by the UN. I mean, those who support this diplomatic initiative would argue that that's actually not the case. I mean, this is recognising the elected, or there haven't been elections for a very, very long time, but this is the Palestinian Authority, which is the leadership of Palestine in the West Bank, and that's very separate from Hamas. But I think the US is only likely to agree to a Security Council vote a long, long way into the future as part of negotiations for a two-state solution towards the latter stage of that.
I mean, could that possibly shift if the United States grows even more obviously exasperated with Israel? Might it be a fairly conclusive slapping down of Benjamin Netanyahu that might at this point appeal to Joe Biden?
Look, I think it would be, then we're talking in the realms of abstention or voting positively for the recognition of Palestine. I mean, this is a big deal, and however unpleasant Benjamin Netanyahu might be, however tense the relations might be between the White House and the Knesset. Nonetheless, the US and the West has very complex security interests in Israel as an ally. It wouldn't be something that they would reverse just for this diplomatic move, which would be huge for Palestine, huge for Israel.
And just finally, though, is it clear on what people are recognising when they choose to recognise Palestine? Palestine, obviously, for at least the last 20 years, has effectively had two governments.
Well, I mean, Hamas won elections in 2006, but in 2007 they seized control in Gaza. I don't think they could be considered a legitimately elected representative of the Palestinian people. Mind you, neither can Fatah in the West Bank, because there haven't been elections for so long. And this would be one of the steps towards any kind of two-state solution. There would be legitimate, proper, genuine, democratic elections, because until that happens, it's very hard to make an argument that there is a legitimate representative of the Palestinian people.
Daniela Peled, thank you as always for joining us. You're listening to the Monocle Daily. This is the Daily on Monocle Radio. Now, former US President Donald Trump remains largely off America's election campaign trail due to his ongoing criminal trial in New York. But a series of international visitors to the United States have nevertheless spent the last few weeks trying to forge ties with Trump's campaign, should he be, by some calamitous mischance, re-elected in November. A veritable scramble is underway by European and Asian lawmakers who presently have no direct ties to Trump's inner circle. Washington reporter Simon Marks tells us that senior figures within the former president's entourage say the first Trump administration is getting a fresh look in many global capitals.
What do you do if, like so many other people around the world, you once described Donald Trump as a tyrant in a toupee and a woman-hating neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath, but you then suddenly realise that you may soon have to deal with him if he returns to the Oval Office? For the man who may, by the end of this year, be Britain's Foreign Secretary, that is not an academic question. David Lammy of the UK's opposition Labour Party has been an outspoken critic of Donald Trump, at least until now. This week in Washington, he described the former president not as a profound threat to the international order, Mr. Lammy's assessment back in 2018, but instead as
a leader whose attitude to European security is often misunderstood. I do not believe that he's arguing that the United States should abandon Europe. He wants Europeans to do more to ensure a better defended Europe.
Like many prominent lawmakers around the world, Mr. Lammy and his boss, Britain's opposition leader Sir Keir Starmer, are waking up to the fact that Donald Trump's return to the White House is no longer an implausible impossibility. Polls show that President Joe Biden and his rival are neck and neck in the battle for the Oval Office, and with more than half the world voting in elections this year, there are many countries in which political parties hoping to win power in their own nations are realising they urgently need to forge ties with Trump and his Make America Great Again movement. So Mr. Lammy spoke this week at the right-leaning Hudson Institute in an effort to make amends and build bridges.
Were his words in office a little shocking? Yes, they were. Would I have used them? Probably not. But US spending on defence actually grew under President Trump, as did the defence spending of the wider alliance during his tenure. I tell my European friends, don't personalise this. Do more is the American ask, whoever wins.
At one point in his speech, he even appeared to be positing a comparison between Donald Trump and President John F. Kennedy, insisting that both had warned Europe to take more responsibility for its own defence. Seeing European lawmakers embrace that argument delights Trump loyalists like Elbridge Colby.
We need a different attitude from key European politicians.
Mr. Colby was a Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defence in the first Trump administration. He does not speak for the former president president, nor for the Trump campaign. But he is hotly tipped in Washington to play a prominent role if his former boss is re-elected in November.
We need to have an alignment of basic views and not have this increasingly yawning divide where it's like, wait a minute, these people are not only pursuing a Europe first strategy, but they're expecting us to pay for it, which we can't afford to do.
Because, he says, the United States is going to need to focus its attention not on Europe, but on Chinese expansionism in the Indo-Pacific region. And he is very critical of a slew of European figures, including the former NATO Secretary-General Anders Fogh Rasmussen and Britain's current Foreign Secretary Lord David Cameron, who have in recent weeks travelled to Washington and, he says, harangued Republican lawmakers in a bid to persuade them to keep sending military assistance to Ukraine.
Because we want Europeans to assume more responsibility and we should be prepared for Europe to build up its own defense forces and defense industry, that should be music to the ears of many people in Brussels, maybe center-left governments in Germany. And it's incompatible with this old school kind of like fading neoconservatism, liberal hegemony, George W. Bush, Tony Blair redux that we hear from Cameron and from Rasmussen.
In New York, it is notable that the only foreign dignitary former President Trump has received since his criminal trial began is former Japanese Prime Minister Taro Aso. Now the vice president of Japan's governing Liberal Democratic Party, he visited Trump Tower last month, sent by Prime Minister Fumio Kishida on a mission to build ties to the former president, just in case he becomes president again.
Well, he's a highly respected man in Japan and beyond. We got to know each other, we like each other, and we'll be talking about Japan and the United States right now, and lots of other things also. But highly respected. It's a great honor to have him.
Leading figures in Trump's inner circle are quietly thrilled that the former president is now being romanced by figures who, in some cases, were previously critical of him. Some believe it is evidence that after more than 3 years of the Biden administration, international governments are, like many American voters, feeling more positive about the Trump presidency and its foreign policy. But Trump's critics say it is a mistake to cozy up to him.
People are fantasizing if they think that, somebody else is going to swim. It's about how he reads the situation.
Fiona Hill served on the National Security Council until the summer of 2019 when she broke with Trump and resigned, going on to testify against him during his first congressional impeachment hearing. She says political leaders overseas are deluding themselves if they think that any relationship with a future Trump administration will be anything other than purely transactional.
He wants to be, in a way, Putin, the czar, the king, the person who's kind of recognized as the top of the heap with the vertical of power. It's all just about what Trump gets out of something. So, the idea that somebody else is going to be, they could maybe nudge him in a certain direction, but ultimately it'll all come down to what he thinks is in it for him, personally.
This week, those arguments fell on deaf ears, at least as far as Britain's David Lammy was concerned.
You were going to struggle to find any politician in the Western world who hasn't had things to say in response to Donald Trump. You're really going to struggle. If I have the privilege of becoming Foreign Secretary, where I can find common cause with Donald Trump, I will find common cause.
And for many officials who think that one day soon they may be working with Trump back in the White House, the outreach continues. For Monocle Radio, I'm Simon Marks in Washington.
This is the Monocle Daily with me, Andrew Muller. Persuading people to take their holidays in Taiwan should not be complicated or difficult. It is an entirely delightful country. Taiwan's landscape is geographically diverse and beautiful, yet navigably compact, and Taiwan's cities are bustling and exciting, yet also clean and orderly. A few posters here and there saying, "Visit Taiwan, it's great," would, you would reckon, do the trick. However, Taiwan's tourist authorities are are insisting on making heavy weather of their task. They have unveiled a somewhat baffling new slogan, Waves of Wonder, which sounds like the title of the last album made by some landfill indie group shortly before they get dropped by the major label who thought they'd signed the new Coldplay. I'm now joined by James Chambers, Monocle's Asia editor based in Bangkok, and by Tom Webb, Monocle's deputy head of radio, who worked on a previous tourism campaign for Taiwan 10 years ago. James, I will start with you. Are we actually clear in the slightest what they mean by Waves of Wonder?
So this was announced on Monday at a big ceremony in Taipei, and there's been a lot of good feedback about the typology and the font, but the slogan itself, Waves of Wonder, has left a lot of people kind of scratching their heads, because if you were playing some kind of quiz game and you knew that some country had come up with a new slogan, it was Waves of Wonder, you would automatically think of some kind of surfing destination, right? You'd be thinking maybe Hawaii or something like that. But actually, Taiwan is not known for its surfing, even though you can actually try it there, or really for any of its kind of beaches or ocean pursuits. Even though it's an island, it's always looked inward, looked in at the kind of mountains, and kind of been afraid of the sea for reasons we might get into. So this choice of slogan, Waves of Wonder, has made a lot of people think, well, what the hell are they referring to?
Tom, I'll bring you in now, because you, to make it clear to our listeners, have form in attempting to promote Taiwan to the world.
I do. And actually, I was just thinking, listening to Being Afraid of the Ocean, my experience with Taiwanese people is they are quite literally afraid of the ocean. There's this idea that the hungry ghosts will drag you under the water. These are ancestors that didn't have anyone to pass their ghostly apparitions onto. I worked on Time for Taiwan, which is another slogan that means slightly nothing. And it came in partnership with other slogans such as Touch Your Heart, Taiwan Touch Your Heart, which makes me feel a bit woozy. And then the Time for Taiwan slogan came with others, which was Time for Relaxation, Time for Pampering. And all of these messages became very proliferated and didn't actually mean anything to anyone. And then you've got the whole problem that this campaign faced. Two big problems is that sort of marketing that works very well domestically in Taiwan really does not appeal to Western audiences, and that's the market that they're looking for in their tourism pushes. And these are things like sort of cartoon bears with sunglasses and sort of really brash and loud colours. And people see that if on the London Underground, for example, and don't really quite understand it. And then it doesn't translate to when you want to book the holiday as well, because in London there were no direct flights, for example, to Taipei during this very, very expensive campaign. And if you did want to fly to Taipei, you had to stop in Bangkok. And of course, Bangkok is where all the British tourists were going anyway. So it was a very complex, difficult campaign that I was part of.
James, when Taiwan sells itself, what are they actually selling? As far as Taiwan is concerned, what is its appeal to foreign tourists?
Well, it's interesting that Tom mentioned people stopping off in Bangkok, because I think that's one of their big problems, is that there's a lot of confusion. If they were being honest, they might say, come to Taiwan, it's not Thailand. It sounds funny to say it, but it is a problem that people get the two confused, and they're nowhere near each other. And obviously the other major problem is China, mainland China, the People's Republic of China. That's the big neighbor, and a lot of tourists either think they're the same place or just don't know about Taiwan. So for much of their history, since the Civil War, they've just been looking inward and not really being sure of who they are and their identity and promoting themselves. They were called, and still are called, actually, the Republic of China. And it's only now that they're embracing this idea of Taiwan and this different identity. And they are starting to look outward again. But yeah, to your question, Andrew, who are they and what are they selling? People in this region will know Taiwan and Taipei for having, amazing food and amazing night markets, but that's true of almost everywhere in Asia. They have, beautiful mountains. It's quite a small place, easy to get around. But everyone who goes there, who ends up going there, sometimes, and a lot of the time, it's by accident or it's a plan B. But everyone always has a wonderful time. I love Taiwan. It's just, how do you market it? I always describe it as the best bits of China and the best bits of Japan combined, because Japan was kind of governed Taiwan during the colonial era for about 50 years. So it is an amalgamation of these two different countries. So it has a lot going for it. But it's at this age-old problem of how do you package it? And I think this Waves of Wonder campaign, which is meant to be the tourism slogan for the next 10 years, really hasn't addressed that at all. If you look at some of the comments on social media and platforms like Reddit, it's quite funny listening to what people think it should be. Someone said it's just call it the cool China, which would be, I think, quite accurate, or just be a bit more timely and just say, TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductors. I mean, that was a bit tongue-in-cheek, but I think when you're doing a slogan like this, you need to be honest, you need to be truthful, and the problem with this Waves of Wonder is that it is not at all.
To go back to you, Tom, I think James there just came up with about 3 slogans that are better than the current one. We are all wasted in this job, really. But when you were working to try and pitch Taiwan to the world, I'm sure you looked at other examples of catchy tourism slogans for inspiration. What does actually work in trying to sell a country in a one-line pitch?
It's imagery. It's all about the images, and that's what Thailand does very well. It understands what Western people are looking for. They're looking for those sun-drenched beaches, that single boat just sitting on the shores. They're looking for the undiscovered. And unfortunately, Taiwan are obsessed with this idea of interviewing Western people in their country, saying, look how great it is, look how fun it is. And it translates, again, very badly, because people see that and think, oh, they're Western people, they're already. I want to be the first person to go to Taiwan. And I think Taiwan's images, they find it very, very difficult to shake off its industrial reputation. It happened 10 years ago when we did research into what people thought of Taiwan. And it's happening now. They think it's just a big industrial island, and they're not doing enough to move away from that by looking into their mountains, as James says, and the fact that they do have beaches that you can surf in the south. My focus very much was on film locations. I mean, a lot of Scorsese's films were being filmed at the time. Life of Pi, all those wonderful sort of fluorescent seas and oceans. All of that was being ignored, and that is what speaks to Western audiences, a frame of reference that they understand. And that would be my big pitch to Taiwan: is just think about the mindset of the people you're targeting.
I mean, it's worth saying that Taiwan is not the only country in Asia who are having a bit of a tourism rebrand. It seems like there's a lot of countries looking at it. And recently I was down in the Philippines for the first time since COVID, and I'd noticed that they'd actually ditched their slogan, "It's more fun in the Philippines," which I think, in my opinion, I don't know what Tom thinks, is perhaps one of the best in this part of the world, and probably one of the most successful. So that's no longer here, and they've replaced it with the slightly needy and demanding "Love the Philippines." This has come under the new President Marcos regime, so I'm not sure how much input he's had into this, but I don't know if that is going to enjoy the same success as It's More Fun in the Philippines, but we'll have to see. But anyway, it just goes to show that coming up with these slogans are very, very, very difficult, and perhaps, Andrew, we should stick to our day jobs because it's far safer.
James Chambers and Tom Webb, thank you. You're listening to the Monocle Daily. This is the Monocle Daily with me, Andrew Muller. Tomorrow night sees the final of the 68th iteration of the Eurovision Song Contest, this year held in Malmö following Sweden's frankly inexplicable victory last year. This year, given that Australia were voted out at the semi-final stage, there is even less reason than usual for anybody to pay any attention to tomorrow evening's proceedings. But this transparent fix by crooked judges and deaf audiences has not eroded the enthusiasm of Monocle's Eurovision desk chief, Fernando Augusto Pacheco, who joins me now from Malmö, where, Fernando, I believe there is controversy.
Of course there's controversy. It's Eurovision, Andrew. But, to be fair, I mean, this is quite a big controversy. As you know, Israel went through the second semi-final, will be performing on Saturday. There's been some protest in Malmö, and now we have quite a big controversy with the Dutch entry, Joost Klein. And the reason I'm correlating Joost Klein with Israel, that during a press conference, I mean, he didn't look very pleased when the Israeli candidate said, was answering the question from a journalist. But the real reason that he might not be attending the rehearsal, apparently, and I say here, apparently, there's been an altercation with a photographer, but nobody knows the exact reason. But I do have a feeling there's something to do with the Israeli entry.
Fernando, if they're not attending the rehearsal, does that mean the Dutch are out of the final? Does anybody know how this works?
We don't know yet, but I have a faint feeling that he will be attending the final. And then I don't know, because you're right. I mean, if today would be the performance for the jury, and if he's not there, what they will do. I wonder if they will count perhaps the performance from the previous rehearsal. That's still unclear. And it's interesting because, to be fair, he was one of my favorite entries. There was lots of love towards his song, which was a tribute to Europe in a way. So it's quite interesting. We have to wait and see.
Fernando, what has the general vibe in Malmö been like? I'm guessing, well, I'm not guessing, I've seen the footage of the extraordinary security operation underway, especially endeavouring to protect that Israeli entrant.
Yes, indeed. You can clearly see, and we're going to hear in an interview I've done to talk a little bit more about the security in the city and how the city was planning for this event. But let's also come back to earth here, Andrew. It's Eurovision. There are a lot of people dressed up. I mean, so many Irish people. I mean, the Irish, my God, they brought a huge crowd here. The Spanish as well. I'm with the Spanish. I love the Spanish entry. So it's kind of this weird feeling that, yes, people are concerned. There's some level of tension among the artists, even some strange scenes. The Italian contestant, Angelina Mango, with her great song La Noia, but she went to the press area and she said, guys, I have a message for you. And she suddenly started singing John Lennon's Imagine. Imagine all the people. I guess she wants a little bit of peace, but I don't know if that will help much.
I mean, that does at least mean, Fernando, that nothing that gets sung tomorrow night will be the worst thing sung at this year's Eurovision, because Imagine by John Lennon is, of course, the worst song ever written by anybody.
Exactly. And Andrew, just to be say, here at Eurovision, things are serious as well. I had the pleasure to speak with Anna Wittgren. She was working at the 2013 Eurovision, which was also in Malmö. She's the head of communication and marketing for the city. We had a very nice chat, and she was telling me about security, how safe Malmö is for the event. Shall we have a listen?
For one thing, Malmö has grown as a city immensely since then, but also the whole landscape, the whole media landscape. I mean, we barely had Facebook back along in 2013, and now the word of Malmö will be spread all over the world thanks to social media. And also in 2013, we estimated that about 30,000 people came, and this time we're expecting as much as up to 100,000 people to come to Malmö. So huge difference and a much bigger impact.
From, I believe, 90 different countries, as Petra Mede said on stage, right? That's incredible.
That is incredible, yeah. And that just shows what Eurovision is all about, bringing the world together.
And there's something about Eurovision in Sweden, in my opinion, right? I mean, you won 7 times. It's a pastime for the country, right?
Well, yes. It does take up rather a lot of our TV time. We do the whole quarterfinal through January and February, and then we are very engaged. But Sweden is very much a music country. Lots of people sing in choirs. I think we are the most choir-intense country in the world. And we also had some huge exports, obviously, with music back along even before ABBA. But yeah, music is a big part of our life.
We need to talk about security. I think that's a big story here. And I could even compare to 2013. I see more police in the streets. And it's challenging, I believe, to host an event like this when you have the geopolitical events that are happening right now. What do you have to say about it, and what do you have to change, actually, compared to 2013?
Well, like you say, the landscape is completely different. And also when we bid for the Eurovision Song Contest and we were rewarded it, that was before the situation in the Gaza obviously took a turn much for the worse. But we have ever since early autumn worked together with police and other authorities to make this a safe event for everybody to attend. And we feel they're doing a great job. You feel very safe walking around in Malmö. And yesterday we could have the big demonstration and the Eurovision at the same time. And Malmö is normally a place where more than 180 nationalities get along. So we're used to difference of opinions. We're used to the cultural meetings. So yeah, lots of things have changed, but I do think we are, together with all the authorities and the police, are actually making sure it's a safe place for everybody.
And including to the artists as well, including to some of the contestants who perhaps need some extra touch of security.
Yes, they do, obviously. But also, I think that's been the case for a very long time. But we want to make sure that the artists feel safe, but also can enjoy parts of Malmö.
What else, talking about the infrastructure of the city in terms of events and transport? So, for example, I have here there was a special ticket where you could travel for free in Malmö. That made life quite easy, I have to say.
Yeah, yes. For the artists and the press, we do try and make it as easy as possible, but also for the visitors. Our local transport company have done a Eurovision Song Contest ticket so that you can travel for a certain amount during the whole event, just to make it seamless to be able to travel and to come here easily. And also there's a ticket to go to Copenhagen, all included. So yeah, we do try and work together.
What's your experience with Eurovision? Are you just a typical Swede that loves Eurovision? I mean, you enjoy Lorraine's performance or the acts this year, which are also great. What's your view on Eurovision personally?
Well, I don't always watch it, but now I have some children living at home and they love it. But I'm a huge Carola fan. Do you know the Swedish?
Yes.
I'm a huge Carola fan. Oh, absolutely. She's the queen of queens. So I'm a huge fan of her. Last year was 30 years ago since she had her breakthrough in Malmö. So we got to meet her. She's got a little plaque on the wall where it happened. So yeah.
Well, but tomorrow is the big final. How are you feeling? Are you feeling optimistic? Because yes, I've been walking around the city. You're right. I mean, there is a lot of security, but I felt safe. I mean, and I think sometimes, people see it from the outside and they're like, oh, perhaps it's not safe to be there. I have perhaps a different view being here.
Absolutely. And I think you're just right there. If you're here, you feel completely safe. It's the people talking about it who are not here. So once here, we feel completely safe. But yeah, we do try and provide a place where everybody's safe, and we want as many people to come and feel the Eurovision vibe.
And Andrew, I just want to confirm what Anna's saying, because I've been walking around close to the arena and even in the nearby city of Copenhagen. There is a sense of safety, perhaps because of the police. So perhaps, and it's interesting that the Swedish newspapers, they're covering, apparently there's some imagery of protests that people are sharing on social media. They were from protests from 2009. So we have to have a balance here as well. I mean, there is tension in the air, but I think the vibe is not as stressy as some people might say as well.
And just finally, Fernando, it would be remiss of me not to ask our Eurovision desk chief, who is your tip?
Well, my tip, it's getting clearer and clearer to me that Croatia is a big one. I think Baby Lasagna might take us to Zagreb next year.
Fernando Augusto Pacheco, Monocle's Eurovision desk chief in Malmö, thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Monocle Daily. Finally on tonight's show, attentive London-based Monocle listeners and subscribers may have noticed new awning donned by our Monocle Cafe not far from here. Starting today and until the 31st of May, the fashion powerhouse Gucci has taken over our Chiltern Street outpost to coincide with the launch of their cruise collection in London. Monocle's fashion director Natalie Theodosi and Monocle's editor Josh Fennett join me now with more. Natalie, first of all, this is all part of the efforts by Gucci's creative director, Sabato De Sarno, his first destination show here in London. What can you tell us about it?
It's Sabato De Sarno's first cruise show, which is really exciting. It's a big debut for them. He started last year, and together with a new executive team at Gucci, they've really been writing a brand new chapter. They've reworked everything from the logo to the brand color to the aesthetic of the collection. And this is the first time that they are taking that collection and their show on the road, coming to London to present a collection. So it will be a really big moment. They're going to be at the Tate and taking over Chiltern Street leading up to the show.
Is this kind of rebrand, rejig, rethink, whatever it is, a huge deal for Gucci? Is it something they do very often?
They don't do it very often, which I think it's why it is a big deal. I think it was the right moment, though, and they're responding to what customers want and what the market wants, which is, I think, clothes that are a lot more timeless, classic, and they wanted to tie the collections that you see on the runway today with what is in their archives and what's more linked to the history of Gucci. So I think it's a great time to be doing it. And Sabato De Sarno, who is a very seasoned designer, he worked for years as the head of design at Valentino, is quite a good person to be leading the change.
And Josh, what else can you tell us about the wider collaboration between Gucci and Monocle?
The question you were born to ask, Andrew. I can tell you've been thinking about this one all day. I think it's interesting for us on a number of levels. I think the Gucci story is one that we're very interested in. This idea of subtle reinvention is important. And actually, the reason that Gucci came to London is because the improbably named founder, Guccio Gucci, took extraordinary inspiration from London. Actually, he was working, I think, as a porter. He was handling luggage in the Savoy down on the Strand, and some of the looser fittings and colours and the outfits worn by the glittering guests was some of the first things that inspired him. And then he went back to Florence and, took an incredible lead in designing luggage and making things that mimicked that kind of moment of high spirits in London. So it's a bit of a homecoming, clearly an Italian brand, but also an Italian brand that scanned the horizon, saw Monocle, thought that they could perhaps engage with us, our expertise of the city where Midori House is based, where our HQ is, and to make a small keepsake for the people attending the show. So what we've done is we've made a rather beautiful 160-plus page travel guide, of which there are an extremely limited number. And part of the association is that they'll be doing their drinks at the Chiltern Firehouse, and right opposite that, as you know, is the Monocle Cafe, which will be decked out in a beautiful Ancora Rosso awning. We've redone our coffee cups. We've decorated the cafe with some of the pictures taken by the amazing photographers who collaborated with the guide. We are journalists at Monocle, but it's lovely to work with a brand who wants to tap into that journalism and to tap into the recommendation and the stories that we love to tell about the city to engage with theirs. So an altogether great tie-up. I'm waiting for my Gucci loafers. They haven't arrived yet. But Natalie, you'll be at the show, is that correct?
I will, yes, and I'm really excited. I think it will start with drinks at the Savoy, where it all started for the brand, and then the Tate, which is somewhere where Sabato spends a lot of time in to gather inspiration. So it's kind of their worlds coming together. They're going back to their roots, and I'm sure the show will be a real joy.
And Andrew, because I know you're on a time limit, desperate to get out of the studio and get down to the Monocle Cafe for the drinks that are happening this evening, I just wanted to turn the microphone to you and ask you a question.
Go on.
Where does Guccio Gucci rank in the double names? In the pantheon of great double names.
It's one of the classics. I especially like the O in the middle of it.
Because you think it might have some sort of Irish connection?
That's what I was wondering.
I don't believe so.
Natalie Theodosi and Josh Fennett, thank you for joining us. The Monocle Times Gucci collaboration is on at the Monocle Cafe until the 31st of May. And that is all for this edition of the Monocle Daily. It was produced by Carlotta Rebello and researched by Gunnar Gronlid. Our sound engineer was Lily Austin. I'm Andrew Muller here in London. The Daily is back at the same time on Monday. Thanks for listening and have a great weekend.